I am currently wearing my very first mock-up of my wedding dress. So this video series is going to be on making my wedding dress. This is so exciting. I took the orange lingerie pattern and extended it to cover more of the waist because this ends at the waistline, so, well, it ends above my waistline. But I'm trying to make a corset out of this, so I extended it and I'm gonna cut it out. And yes, this is black because I have a ton of this black canvas and I don't have a ton of the white, so I'm gonna use this as my mock-up. I finally have a mock-up that I'm happy with. Well, I think I'm in version 5 or 6 or maybe 7, I don't remember. I got flat bones here. I have the flexible ones over there. I've got the right cups and I even have underwires. So I'm gonna cut this out of the real fabric now. I stashed the pattern in my sewing notebook so I wouldn't lose anything. This is a white denim which is strong and mostly non-stretch and good for corsets and generally strength layers that will be under tension. I marked the waistline in pen to align the pieces and to place the waist tape later. I used a heat erasable pen, but I did go over it with a real pen later because I ironed every seam and still needed the marks. The outside fabric was from Mood Fabrics and I chose a shade that matches my skin tone just in case, like if my dress moves, it won't be too obvious. I cut the pattern again, just like that. I really want to iron these, but I used the heat erasable pen, which means I really can't. I'll just iron after I sew them together. I pinned the fashion layer and the strength layers independently, being way more careful than I usually am with this step, because I want this whole wedding project to be perfect. Ow! Yes, nothing will go wrong. With 2 copies, it's time to sew! I stitched the same direction on all corset seams with 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. The fabric does shift slightly while sewing, and you want this to be as even as possible. That is also why I will be hand basting the actual bodice. I pressed all my seams open, and since there is a more dramatic change of angle at the waist, I ironed it from the top and the bottom of the seams separately. Except for the center seams, those are pretty flat. Time to add the waist tape! Since the waist will be under the most tension, I'm reinforcing it with twill tape. It's non-stretch and something I buy in bulk. I lined that up with the pen marks and pinned it into place at every seam. If you notice some round holes in the corset here, here's the rest of it. I cut the pieces on the straight of grain with no stretch the first time. I only have a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance on the cut pieces, since a bulky seam allowance would show on the outside. So yes, there are 2 different seam allowances on this pattern, but it's fairly easy to keep track of. I transferred the marks and used them to align the pieces. Usually on stuff like this, I wouldn't bother with pinning and I'd just go for it, but I'm shooting for perfection here. I stitched these with the itty bitty seam allowance. I chain stitch things like this because it's faster and wastes less thread, as opposed to cutting the thread in between each one. I pinned on the top band, starting at the mark/seam. And since you clicked on this wedding video, I'm going to talk about that now. Patrick and I are taking ballroom dance lessons and oh my gosh are they fun! I was an ice dancer so I knew I would love it, but Patrick really does too. I think I'm going to redo this, cut these on the grain so there's a bit of stretch and add a little bit here. You've been a good girl, Amy. I'm going to attach the cups and try to assemble the rest of the corset today, but I have a bit of a problem. My sewing room is trashed. There's so many different projects going on in here right now. I don't want to clean them up because then I have to get them all out again, but I also cannot work like this. Except for the petting. I can always do petting. There's also a Cricut project waiting over there. I stitched through the waist tape at each seam on the strength layer to keep it in place. I put the layers right sides together and pinned the top edge. I'm following the Rose Cafe Bustier dress instructions here even though it's not her pattern because they still work. Go watch her video, it's very helpful, especially for the girl who usually avoids corsets, which, fun fact, technically, this is my very first. But I've been making boned bodices for years now, just without any waist reduction. I sewed the 1/2 inch seam allowance up the back, and the 1/4 inch seam allowance along the top and the cup holes. The clear part of my presser foot is 1/4 inch wide, so it's my gauge. I trimmed my corners and clipped my curves so it will turn right side out neatly. I used a chopstick to really poke out the corners, especially the center front. Time to iron. Ironing is really not fun, but makes things look so much more professional. I did a test of a possible lace embroidery for my dress. It's not going to be in black, it was just a thread that was in the machine, and it doesn't really matter because it was just a test. But it's going to be a lot more complicated than this. I'm still learning how to do this properly. We have come to the time for sewing boning channels. I actually bought the proper materials for the first time ever. Normally I just use the plastic because it's easy. But I have flat steel boning, which is very flexible. And I have the spiral steel for side seams. There's a minor challenge of these are different sizes, so I have to sew 1/2 inch wide boning channels for these and 1/4 inch wide for this. I pinned on the seams to keep the layers together while I sew them, so everything is perfect! Ow! I marked where the boning channels will be in heat erasable pen. My initial mark was not centered, so I'm going to do this again, but it'll look the same. I used an air erase marker the second time. Much better. I stitched along this line carefully, for perfection. You know, this whole video may be a lesson that perfection isn't an attainable goal. Ow! But you can always improve your skills. Yes, that sounds deep. Let's go with that. I tested my first channel. Perfect. I just need to keep track of which ones have a 1/2 inch seam and which ones have a 1/4 inch seam. Ow! I keep stabbing myself on these pins. To save myself future stabs, I basted down the center seam, which is a long, straight temporary stitch that I removed later. So I stitched down the boning channels with less accuracy than I had intended, but without stabbing myself again. I'll call it a win. And I didn't sew over the flap, no matter how many times it flopped over. I removed the basting stitches and inserted a flat bone. Perfect. And I did that all again for the 1/4 inch spiral steel boning. Boom. It's either time to put the cups in. Hi. Or I guess I could put the grommets in next. Em had other ideas for what was next, but I went for the cups. I stitched the outside fabric right side to the inside of the cup, so when it's flipped over, it covers the seam like this. I'm really glad I redid these. And I really need to press this. I think I could finish this whole thing today if I didn't have a dog in desperate need of attention, so I guess it'll have to wait. After I figure out how wide the grommets are going to be, I'm going to put another bone in here and have to sew in the cups, and it'll be done. Later though. The next day I pinned the cups in place, and there was a fair amount of adjusting to get these to sit nicely in the gaps. Also, I'm slightly regretting my choice of white for the inside part. It does show slightly. I basted this by hand since the Rose Cafe says to top stitch the seam and I didn't want it to shift. I used my zipper foot to get right up next to the cup. I did take the bones out so I wouldn't risk snapping a needle if I hit one. I have had more than enough needle fragments near my eye for one lifetime, thank you very much. I do have a grommet press, however, I broke the smallest grommet press installer thing, so I'm stuck using this bigger size, but I think I want to have the little ones on here. So I think I'm just going to use the old hammer style, and hopefully I won't smash any fingers this time. Yeah, that didn't last very long, but I decided to try it anyway. No! I was extra careful to line everything up after that, and it went okay. I may cover them with embroidery floss if I have the time. I can say that installing grommets is definitely not a strong point of mine, but they're in not very well, but that's okay, I guess. I cut 1-inch wide bias tape for the underwire channel. I almost skipped the underwires altogether, but wow, do they make all the difference. I also used this to finish the raw edges on the inside. I hand stitched these in place. Ow. Very gracefully. This is very dignified. Definitely makes me look like I know what I'm doing. Beeswax helps to keep the thread from getting tangled. I sewed the right side, not the left side. Remember, this is the inside of the corset. I sewed one edge and added the wire before stitching the other edge. Which was kind of a mess. Also, this happened. Oh no. Where am I bleeding from? I got most of it out with my spit, though. There's something about your saliva can remove your blood, but my saliva won't remove your blood stain. I am not an expert on the subject. I think I'm going to do the other one the other way, where I stitch the whole channel, just leaving an end open and then stick the wire in, because I think that would be easier. Sticking the wire in after sewing the channel was much easier. So I'm just going to close it up and it'll be done. I reinserted the flat bones that I had removed for my eye safety and added the channel by the grommets. Yesterday we cut up and tipped the spiral steel boning with Plastidip, and so I'm ready to finish the corset today. The flexible steel allows for sideways bends in the bones while still holding the garment up. I pinned 2-inch wide bias tape to the outside of the bottom edge and stitched it with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. The bias cut allows it to ease around curves without puckering. I flipped it to the inside edge, folding it twice to cover the raw edges. I hand stitched this to the inside, making sure to not go through the outer fabric, just the denim. That is the corset done. Oh man, I feel it's not uncomfortable. My current waist measurement, not corseted, is like 26.5, and I currently am 25.5, and I am not uncomfortable. That's pretty good. I didn't quite end up with the 2-inch gap I was expecting in the back, but I think that might change with a helper, because this was kind of tricky to do on my own. This is kind of crazy. I'm really not uncomfortable, and I am definitely not naked right now. It kind of looks like it. I think I'm gonna cut the top layer of the petticoat today and let it hang for a couple days because it's gonna be cut on the bias, and then I can start working on the petticoat. And tune back in for the next video to see how I made the petticoat. Thanks for watching!